So you've got two types of information here. You've got the beliefs that head teachers reveal to you in interviews, and you've got the actions.
Yes.
How well did you find those two were aligned?
So we did find that leaders were able to act on their beliefs. And again, I don't know quite why that was, but I think partly because when you're in a turnaround situation, there's a lot of pressure and people want action.
Yes.
So there weren't lots of moderating factors that meant I might have a belief, but I'm unable to act on it. Actually, I'm able to act on my beliefs. But what you do see is that different heads might take the same action, but for different reasons. So one example that we talked about earlier was a decision to create an all-through school. Some leaders would do that to increase resources because they believe that schools fail because they don't have enough resources. And so they would make the decision or take that action for those reasons. Other leaders, though, would create an all-through school. They recognise the financial benefits, but the motivation was that they're able to teach kids for longer. And so one of the things that we saw with them was that actually they would start to, when they started to work out what were good practices at a secondary school level that were really helping performance at a secondary school level, those teachers and those staff actively worked with the primary school to get the behaviours happening earlier, or to get the practices happening earlier, or to get the children used to a way of learning earlier on. Because they recognise that a real challenge at secondary level is if you've got children coming from lots of different, it takes a while to sort of stabilise that and you lose time.
You do, and time, of course, is the only thing you really have in a school.
Yes,
if the child isn't learning in a term, that's a term that's disappeared.
Yeah, completely.
So is it the fact that people took the same action from different beliefs that then led you to think that actually it's the beliefs that matter? Because that's something that comes through quite strongly in your work. In phrases like philosopher and architect are descriptions of a belief rather than a descriptions of a set of actions.
They are. The starting point was the actions. What we then noticed, though, was that the beliefs driving the actions, and as I said, the fact that one action might be taken for two different reasons. So the beliefs actually tended to define the group of actions you took. So actually, I might do this, which another leader does, but I also do this, this, and this.
Yes.
So it's a richer insight to collectively the actions. It also starts to influence the sequence of actions.
Yes.
So when I take them on the journey and when I do them, etc. And finally, it definitely, the belief changes when I think my job's done.
Indeed.
So I might have had an impact.
Yes.
So for example, if one of the phrases we used was surgeon, and their belief was that they were there to get the school back on track, and the fastest way to do that was to cut things out.
Yes.
And then I would give that to somebody else who now could stabilise that and grow that and incrementally improve it. What they didn't realise, but again, schools are no different to other organisations. People assume that the performance of an organisation is linked to the current leader,
Indeed.
not the leader beforehand. And you know, which is crazy, really, because we all know the most significant actions take a while to come through.
They do. So if we now think about the implications of your work for schools, you've been pretty clear that these are all schools that win special measures.
Yes.
And that we should be careful not to generalise it.
Agreed.
To all schools as a whole.
Well, I think in our study, we intentionally selected schools where we hoped people would be able to act on their beliefs.
Yes.
And that they were able to do that.
And that was a good call on your part. There's no doubt that schools in special measures give head teachers a lot more power than schools that are doing well.
Yeah.
So that was a sensible deduction.
Yeah, and then we also, by them having a similar starting point, we could start to see actually the impact of the actions, because it's a cleaner starting point.
So if we think about schools in special measures, so you had your 160,
Mm-hmm.
it may not be random which schools got the architects, the group that you find are most successful. Is it plausible that actually there are circumstances in which an architect isn't the first best choice? Or would you generally say to governing bodies with a school in a turnaround position, these are characteristics you should look for?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. Our motivation for the study was to help heads.
Yes.
But obviously, there are implications for others.
Absolutely.
People.
Someone's got to hire the head in the first place.
Yes, they do. It might be that actually you need to make some cuts before you then grow the school. It might be that actually some of these different types of leaders are right at different points in the journey. It also might be that once the school is turned around and it's now performing very well, that more of a philosopher type approach is the right way to keep it incrementally moving forwards. But they've been given a school that has a good environment, that is got engaged parents, so it's all working from that point of view. It's now how do you improve the teaching over time. I would expect to see differences, and if the other big study that we've been doing alongside this is looking at organisations that performed at a very high level for a very long time. So we intentionally selected ones that have basically been doing the same thing for over 100 years, that have outperformed their peers for at least 30 years, and are generally admired by everybody. And we looked at the New Zealand All Blacks, the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Royal College of Art, but we've also looked at Eton College within that.
I think Eton meets that set of criteria.
And the kind of leadership we found in these organisations is very consistent, but it is very different to the turnaround. So, and when you get to that stage in the journey, actually, you don't want to make big step changes because there's risk involved, and you don't want to destroy what you've already created. So it is very much, the Royal College of Art have a lovely expression, they call it being radically traditional. So it's how do you keep what you've done that's very good, but you're then incrementally improving that going forwards. And a more of a philosopher type of approach could be very useful there.
We see that in some well-established universities as well.
Yes, we do, definitely.
So if you were a head, you've just been appointed this term to a turnaround school, what advice would you be giving that person?
So there's a few things which I think are very important. Our study, so we are now looking at the architects in a lot more detail to really unpick what's going on. And one of the things we found is most important is that you make a 7-year commitment. So you see turning around a school as at least a 7-year journey. And we found that the longer the architects stay at the school, the more impact they have. So the first thing is really to make that commitment.
And how many of your sample of 160 schools had the same head for 7 years? I guess it can't be many.
It wasn't many at all, no. And actually one of the challenges of being an architect is that we found 90% of them almost lost their job at the 2-year mark because improvement in exam results hadn't happened fast enough and their Ofsted rating hadn't improved. So that's a real sort of touch point. And interestingly, there's been a study done looking at CEOs, and it's the 2-year mark that also is critical because you're given 1 year grace. But by year 2, where are the results?
So how many years grace do you think Ofsted, in your view, judging from the evidence you've seen, how long do you think Ofsted should give a school before they turn up and say, hang on a moment, sunshine?
So one of the things that we've noticed is that their exam results won't really improve until year 3. However, other things will change. So engagement will increase. So more students will attend.
Absolutely. It's the absence data which are available to Ofsted. Because Ofsted, of course, don't have all the evidence that you have. They don't get the management information system. But Absence data are public.
And the other thing we found was parents turning up to parents' evening
Yes.
is very important.
Yes.
And staff sickness and staff absence.
Yes.
And this is just an indication that the environment is changing.
Yes.
And what we are looking at now is trying to give people some concrete advice so that they know how much they need to improve that by,
Yes.
and when that will start to lead to changes in exam results, so they can manage boards
Yes.
or external critics, and equally, hopefully, give Ofsted something that's a bit more robust.
Indeed.
To start to say these are good predictors
Yes.
of success in the future. So it's often about the leader making a commitment,
Yep.
then changing the environment by increasing engagement, and then the teaching starts to improve
Yes.
after that.
And the top tips for increasing engagement? What sort of things from your evidence are best?
So the thing that we found that was very interesting, one of the common mistakes that were made by leaders, particularly successful leaders, is that they had success in one school,
Yes.
and they went to another,
Yes.
and they did what they'd done
Indeed.
last time and got very confused that it wasn't working.
I can think of examples like that.
Yes.
Particularly if you go from a school that's been successful for a long time
Yes,
to a school that needs to be turned around.
exactly. And the other difference you get is if you've turned around a school in inner London,
Yes.
and then you move to a coastal area,
Yes.
it's very different. So
Now you mentioned that at the beginning,
Mhm.
the difference between different areas, but in most of your work you talk more about particular types of leader.
we do.
Do you think that actually being coastal per se matters, or is it that being coastal means that you're less likely to attract the sort of head that is successful?
So what we found is that in the coastal area, your access to resources is lower, and you can get round that. For example, you could offer higher salaries
Yes.
to attract people to come,
Yes.
or equally, if you've got a very clear vision about what the school's trying to do, the impact it's going to have in the long run, and people feel part of that journey, then that's exciting for them. So it's working out, how do I attract them? How do I get them to come here? Whereas when you're turning around a school in the middle of London,
Yes.
there's a lot more resources around.
Yes.
The other big difference is that when you turn around a school in a city or an urban area, the community around it starts to change,
Yes, very much so.
because they're quite transient
Yes.
communities. And also, if you look at the number of students around, it's much bigger.
Yes, and they have a choice.
They do.
Whereas if you live in a small village or a small coastal community, there is only
Yes.
one school, or at most two,
Yes.
and roughly half of you have to go to each of them.
Yes, exactly. So what you find is that the impact of the decisions you take takes longer.
Yes.
You could argue, actually, turning around a coastal school
Yep.
or a rural one helps society more
Oh, I would.
than
Yes.
turning around
Yes.
an inner city
Yes.
or urban one, because in some ways, inner city and urban is your student profile just changes.
Exactly, and one head was honest with me. He used to have basically a council house intake because all the middle class families who lived close to him didn't choose his school. As soon as his school got better, all the middle class children picked his school, and the council kids could no longer get in because of the distance criteria. And it
Exactly.
upset him greatly.
Yeah.
And I could understand why. He wanted to make a difference to these children.
And I think that's a real challenge, whereas in a rural or coastal area, you can see the impact you have on the community. And so I think the starting point, and to answer your question, is what school does your community need?
Yes.
And really starting to understand that,
Yes.
and not just assuming
Yes.
it's this or this.
So, a 7-year commitment,
Yes,
a vision for a community,
yes,
a willingness to pay, if you like, as much as it takes to get someone who's capable of delivering those at the very top,
yeah,
whatever you've paid in the past.
yes.
What else should the person do? What practical things within schools to bring down absence have you seen that really work?
Well, I think what really happened, the big thing was when the community started to see value in the school.
Yes.
So I think student attendance is actually a good measure, not only of the students' engagement, also the parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
So once they start to see the value the school is bringing
Yes.
to them, then they're much more engaged. And that is through teaching,
Yes.
but also we notice things like if you are opening the school up for gym memberships
Yep.
or for meetings or for other activities, it starts to
Yes.
become part of the
Yes.
community.
So don't close at 3:30.
Yes.
Open, whether it's children or others coming in, become part of the community.
Because often, actually, you're being judged by your community in the
Yes.
out of hours
Yes.
more than the in hours, because
Yes.
that's closed and they can't
Indeed.
see it.
So whether it's Zumba classes or yoga or
Yeah.
whatever it is, 1,000-calorie workouts,
Yeah.
whatever it is, don't just do it for the money.
Yes.
Do it to be part of the community.
And then, as soon as they feel part of it, as soon as the school becomes part of the community, and it starts to have an impact, then all of these things change. And equally, you notice that staff sickness starts to decline
Yes.
once children are more engaged
Absolutely.
and behaving better,
Yes.
and they feel supported.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And everybody knows a stressed teacher is the one who has stressed pupils and vice versa. And
exactly.
it can go from bad to worse, and if you can break that cycle,
Yeah.
you've got a long way.
And I think one of the actions we saw quite frequently, which actually wasn't positive, was an assumption that good teachers will solve all your problems.
Yes.
So
Yes.
some heads said, look, if I just put in great teachers, everything will get fixed. Whereas actually it's their role to
Yes.
create the environment
Indeed.
so teachers
Yes.
can teach.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Michaela School, not very far from where we're
Mhm.
sitting today,
Mhm.
would be an ultimate example of that, where they
Mhm.
want the teachers to teach, but they believe that discipline and other policies have to be done by the senior
Yes.
leadership team.
Yeah. And you know, there's a reason why a school is failing.
Yes.
And so you can't just motivate everyone
Mm.
more. You can't just be inspirational. You actually have to make some structural changes to help that. And that might mean you need to change a percentage of your team.
Yep.
And that's just part of the process. You may be able to achieve the improvement eventually by not changing your team, but it will take a
Yes.
lot longer.
Yes.
And engagement will dip
Yes.
if people aren't seeing change.
Yes. So being an
improvement.
architect isn't just about building upwards, it is sometimes about cutting out
It
things
is.
that aren't working.
It is, and you get a better return on your investment if you've made a cut beforehand.
Yes. And you've got the money to do the things you need to do. Because
Exactly.
no schools have huge surpluses. They never
No.
have done, and I don't suppose they ever will do.
And they're not run to make surpluses,
No,
are
they're
they?
not.
So,
No,
so
absolutely not.
that's the motivation, and if there are any, they should be reinvested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Harvard Business Review said to you, we think you found things about schools that schools should learn.
Mm-hmm.
Are you hoping to work more with schools in future?
Our motivation is
I mean, ultimately you're an academic, it's
Yes.
not that you're a consultant or
No,
part
no.
of the school system, so
Yeah.
you have the right to move on, although
We
we
do.
hope you don't.
I mean, the motivation for the Centre for High Performance was to improve the UK.
Yes.
And
Yes.
quite selfishly,
Yes.
that's what we want to do.
We're happy with our selfishness. For our foreign viewers, we apologise, but
And we think that high-performing organisations will help society and will help the economy, and maybe the environment too. And we've sort of come into this area to look at schools, and one of the things that is very striking is the number of management academics who also see the importance of
Yes.
helping schools. One of the things that we've also noticed with the organisations who do perform at a very high level for a very long time is that they are actively engaged with society, and they are actually actively engaged with schools. So we'd love to do more work. We're ultimately trying to help the UK,
Yep.
and what better way to help the UK than to improve its schools?
and what better way to end this interview?
Okay.
Alex, thank you.
Thank you.